Welcome to Between the Sheets, the non-judgmental podcast where we're going to cover various sexual health and wellness topics. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Zwonitzer. I'm a urology and sexual health nurse practitioner, and I love helping my patients and listeners discover and develop their most satisfying sexual experiences. Between the Sheets is here to normalize the conversations about sexual health and cover everything from basic anatomy to the most taboo topics and everything in between. Real talk, real pleasure, one episode at a time. So come on, let's get between the sheets. This episode is sponsored by Boston Scientific and its educational website on erectile dysfunction, edcure.com. One study estimated that more than 50% of men over the age of 40 have some degree of erectile dysfunction, which can be frustrating and confusing. Go to edcure.com to find information on erectile dysfunction and treatment options, including long-term treatment options offered by Boston Scientific. Boston Scientific does not endorse any statements or opinions expressed during this episode. Welcome back to Between the Sheets. We're going to have a great episode today. We're going to talk to you about mismatched libidos, relationship styles, and wherever else the conversation leads us. I have Lauren Muratore here with us today. I am excited to have her here to help with this conversation. Lauren, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Stephanie. Well, I'm actually from Melbourne, Australia. So I work a lot with couples and individuals. And so I've got a private practice. I've been doing that for about 7 years, counseling for almost a decade, always working in sexual health. I'm also national chair of the Society of Australian Sexologists, and I'm one of our clinically accredited psychosexual therapists.
I love it. I love it. I
So-
always love having people from different backgrounds and locations, demographics, everything on here because, there's so much that we can bring to the conversation of sexual health. And yet it varies by where we live too, because the culture in the United States is different than the culture where you are in Australia. And so it's really fun to have guests on here for not only their knowledge and their expertise, but that we get some differences in how things just are as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, cultural lenses do play a little bit of an impact on sexual health and what we like or don't like, what we're doing. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So talk to me about some of the biggest reasons couples come in to see you.
Well, look, I would say definitely the number one reason is one person wants more sex than the other. That is unequivocally just the number one thing. Unfortunately, with this issue that people bring in, everybody thinks that there's something wrong with their relationship or that there's something wrong with them, right? So we're not having as much sex as everybody else, or my partner doesn't find me attractive, they must not love me, I'm rejected. So really they're kind of comparing their relationship to this mythical relationship and saying that they're not good enough.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think, I know medically there are circumstances that can contribute to mismatched libidos, hormone issues, pain with sex, erectile dysfunction, certain things like that. From a relationship standpoint and a psychosexual standpoint, what are you seeing that contributes besides just the medical issues?
Yeah, look, that's a really good question. I mean, some of the other contributing factors are even just how people interact as a couple. On one side of the spectrum, you can have people who are that best friend style and they do everything together, but that actually kind of de-eroticizes their relationship. They haven't incorporated or integrated flirting, or they haven't they don't sexually touch each other anymore. There's no eroticism. So that's really eroded and they're just kind of like best friends. Or maybe another type of relationship might be they're like housemates and they're not having that kind of emotional connection or, that really heartfelt connection anymore. So I think there's a lot of relationship attributes that would probably contribute to maybe one person not wanting sex, or just being annoyed at our partners, which goes, or having high conflict, resentment. And personal issues, I guess shame and guilt and, what is going on for us in our world? Is it stress? And so there's so many different contributing factors. That's a really hard question to answer in a
Yeah.
nutshell.
Yeah. And it's amazing how, we kind of, as a society, put sex in this box. Like, you should just be able to do it. It's just one section of your relationship. And yet, everything in our life, and whether it's work stress, financial stress, relationship things, physical things, all of that contributes to whether or not we're going to be sexually active or even desiring that sexy time single or in a couple.
Exactly. I mean, it's just kind of odd to think about, like, all right, well, let's say we're in a relationship and, two people who've been on the go since like 8 7 8 o'clock in the morning, and you come home and well, you've got kids or don't have kids, or you're doing everything
Mhm.
around the house and it's 9 o'clock and you've been on the go for like, 12 13 hours, and you're just all of a sudden supposed to want sex.
Right.
It's
Right.
like, and without talking to your partner or without
Mhm.
touching or having any connection, and just be doing. It's like, why, if you're not feeling sexy, or they're not showing any, like, I guess, wanting to do anything, why are you just supposed to magically want it? It just doesn't make
Right.
sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm dog tired at the end of the day. My kids are older teenagers and they make fun of me because they've been tucking me into bed for years now, because they stay up later than I do. I want my bedtime. And for me personally, like bedtime sex is my least favorite because like you said, I'm done. I've done my skincare, taken my shower. I'm ready to just relax and go to bed. And the thought of doing cardio and getting turned on and all of those things, like, no, man, I'm done. I'm done for the day.
Do you know what? That's pretty common. That's what a lot of people say. That's what every
Yeah.
gender, every age, that's what a lot of people say. It makes sense. But at the same time, I guess the paradox to that is that's the only time a lot of couples have to actually have intimacy when, maybe their kids are asleep, or, they aren't working. So it's kind of this really challenging situation for a lot of people where we're exhausted, we're tired, we wanna just chill out,
Mhm.
but it's the only time we're
Yeah.
supposed to be having sex.
Right. Right. How do you kind of start to help couples work through that? What's some of the tips without obviously getting too deep because you don't have a specific couple in front of you, but for our listeners to kind of start some of these conversations and working on this at home, where can they start?
Yeah, a good place to start is really concentrating on your capacity, so not
Mm,
making it about all or nothing. I think a lot of people think
okay.
they're either having sex or not having sex at all, and
Yeah.
then that then contributes to, "Well, we haven't had sex in 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years," and that's a problem. So if you're thinking about what do we have the capacity for at the moment? What do we like to do? There's like a million things you can do between nothing and swinging from the chandeliers, for example.
Yeah.
Right? Thinking about what you like, what your partner likes, or what you'd be open to, right? So if we're absolutely
Mhm.
exhausted, there are so many things you could be doing when you're absolutely exhausted. That doesn't have
Mhm.
to be the full 6 course meal, for example. You could have a
Right.
little taster.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, part of that too is a lot of heterosexual couples, sex equals P and V.
Yeah, yeah.
And it doesn't have to. There are other ways to be intimate. There are other ways to touch your partner and things like that. And I think, that can be a downer for their relationship because there are so many other things to explore and to do that it doesn't always have to come down to penetration.
Exactly. If you're just kind of like thinking it has, like, penetration has to count, like, then that kind of makes it goal oriented. So if you're not kind of achieving your goal, you're going to feel like you're failing. So
Yeah.
I guess I just reframe it completely and go like, well, let's be creative and let's figure out what it is, right? Because I mean, I don't know, personally, I like different things at different times, at different days, different people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, okay, they're talking about what they like when they're exhausted, things like that. What if they just haven't talked about sex before? And like that's kind of a weird topic for them to even bring up. They've got this whole best friend thing going on, but that's the one part they don't just like talk about.
Yeah, and look, that's tricky for a lot of people, especially because, some people actually come from backgrounds where they've never been really, I guess, allowed, or don't think that they're allowed to talk
Mhm.
about sex. They've maybe just come from homes where they didn't talk about it. It has kind of this really negative connotation. You kind of can't just say, like, just start talking to your partner about sex. Like, that would be wonderful if it happens, but I think a lot of people kind of get really choked up about it. I would just start off very gentle by just saying, "I notice this is something that we're both afraid to talk about, or this is something that we don't talk about." And then
Mhm.
asking the question, like, what do we need to make that conversation feel safe? Is it while we're just going for a walk and maybe not looking at each other? Does that feel like the pressure's off? Is this maybe talking about a time in our relationship when we did have sex and how that made us feel, right? So kind of talking about it very gentle. It doesn't have to be super stressful. You don't always, people think that, oh, it has to be about the problems, like what we're not doing.
Mhm.
And I think it really discredits, like, just going, hey, that one time back in the day when we were, on that date and we had sex after that great meal. Wasn't that fun? Like that's you're still talking about sex.
Right. Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I like that. So when they are like coming to agreements, kind of negotiating this part of their life, do you find that they're able to kind of negotiate the timing of the sex? How often? What are they trying to kind of get through to be more on the same page?
That's a tricky question because I guess it really depends on the couple. I like to talk about quality rather than
Hmm.
quantity. So I think that's really important as long as you're enjoying the sex that you're having. What I find for a lot of people is they're not having the sex they want to be having. Therefore, it's going to make them not want to have sex and it's just going to decrease their couple satisfaction or their couple sexual satisfaction. So thinking about, well, individually, what kind of sex do I like? What do I actually want to be feeling? What do I want to be giving and receiving from our sex life? Rather than I think scheduling is a really good thing. I know it's not sexy, but back to like talking about the sex window, like if people only have 1 day a week because that's there's ships in the night or that's the only time they actually
Right.
have, why are they thinking they should be having sex every day if it's just
Right.
humanly not possible? So why can't why can't people look forward to that? I guess I kind of like to reframe again, like it could be like a date night. It doesn't have to be
Hmm.
it's not unsexy. You can go, wow,
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to doing XYZ. What are you thinking about? And you can kind of get excited about knowing you're going to have some hopefully good sex rather than going, oh God,
Yeah.
it's Tuesday night at 8 o'clock and we have to get it on.
Right, right. Yeah,
Right.
because we're supposed to. Yeah. And I love what you're saying about the whole, scheduling. For me, I love that because it's like you said, you know that that's what today is. And so throughout the day, you can send each other messages. If you have difficulty getting aroused, maybe you listen to an erotic novel on your commute, you take your everything shower that day, you do your whatever. And it kind of like sets the mood all day and builds up that anticipation, which then can make for a really nice date night whether or not it ends up in sex.
Exactly, 100%. And I mean, you can even like lead up to that too, like the days before. Like, yeah, definitely listening to those sexy erotic blogs or,
Mhm.
podcasts and like really kind of simmering and getting kind of aroused and sitting in that rather than, I guess, masturbating yourself, pleasuring. You can kind of sit
Right.
in that energy and just wait until your date.
Yeah, I love that. And I like that you were talking about too about, when you have sex that maybe you don't like or isn't your type of sex and how that can detract from wanting more of it. I had a partner that really liked one particular position, was very focused on his own orgasm rather than making sure that I was also enjoying the experience. And yet, if I wasn't moaning and doing all the right things, he's like, well, I can just tell you're not in the mood. Well, I just don't want to do the exact same position in the exact same way right before bedtime yet again. And so I think that being able to talk about that is really important, like you said, and being able to be open with your partner and being like, oh, maybe they didn't even realize they were being that selfish and only liked one thing. And they're like, okay, well, what do you want to try? And maybe, unfortunately, like my situation, they don't change and that's just what they like. And then you're like, all right, well, this is not going to work for me. But I think that that's such a great point that you made that it might not even just be that you aren't wanting sex, period, but maybe you need a different style or arousal way or something that can enhance that experience.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I find like yeah, exactly. You're not going to want to have sex if it's the sex that you don't want to be having, right? So I kind of it just kind of always goes back to being able to talk about that
Mhm.
and what we're comfortable with. I find though a lot of, especially I will gender stereotype, a lot of women that I see aren't enjoying the sex that they want to be having, and they're actually too afraid to kind of speak up to talk about the sex that they want to be having. So I work through that with a lot of clients. On the other side of that coin, though, I find predominantly, look, not everybody, kind of maybe not like the person you spoke about, people generally want to please. Right.
Mhm.
They usually want to make sure that their partner is enjoying themselves. So sometimes people are in their own little world and they think that that one position that they do that like the other person's loving it. And if
Yeah.
the other person's saying, I don't love it, they're always going to do that position because they think that the other person really likes it. So that's why it's really important to talk about these things because
Yeah.
everybody's just having maybe either the bad sex you don't want to be having.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that tip. Love that. The other thing that we were going to talk about today is relationship styles. Traditionally, here in America, and I'm guessing down there as well, heterosexual relationships have been the norm. Single, monogamous, one partner for many, 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 many years, or after your phase of dating in college, maybe you met in high school, whatever. But there's a lot of different styles of relationships that bring people fulfillment and joy.
Absolutely. I think consensual non-monogamy, ethical non-monogamy, polyamory, open relationships, I guess, whatever kind of language you'd like to use. I would say they're more on the rise, or at least people are very open to talking about it or open to being open about it. I'm finding
Mhm.
a lot of couples are really kind of curious about that. And even I would say younger demographics, especially, are thinking about it or just kind of entering into the dynamics.
Yeah, I would say in my patient population in my urology office, I talk about sex a lot. I would say the younger population, 20s, 30s, maybe early 40s, are definitely talking to me more about ethically non-monogamous, having multiple partners. And yet my older patients, 60s, 70s, 80s, are still very much heteronormative, monogamous kind of relationship. And I sometimes I struggle with how to talk about them, which is why I'm so excited to have you on today and talking about this, because I don't have a lot of experience with it. I have some friends that participate in the lifestyle and I've learned from patients, but I have guys that will come in specifically for erection issues with group sex, because when they're just with their partner, they're fine. They can go long enough that satisfies both of them, things like that. But, in a group setting, they'll climax and then they might not get an erection for a while again because of their refractory period, and they don't like that. So we talk about different ways to kind of work through that from a medical standpoint and that sort of thing. So it's been interesting to me to see that kind of change and that openness. And so I guess I want to learn more about it because I want to be able to help my patients better. So talk to me about kind of what you're seeing in that ethically non-monogamous kind of area. How are they working through that? Do they set boundaries? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think people just start when we're kind of curious about it. It's like, well, what are they kind of wanting to experience, right? Like, why are we doing this? And I think for a lot of people, it's knowing that one person can't satisfy all of their needs. It's also wanting to be curious and I guess also emotionally and sexually experimental or connecting even with other people. So I mean, it could look as like as potentially as open as going to a party, for example, where it's I don't want to say transactional. There still could be connections, but the rules would be maybe different than if we were going to engage in having another partner come into
Mhm.
our relationship.
Yeah.
So it's really depending on the relationship kind of and what we're wanting to look at. So if we're wanting to look at like kind of purely sexual experiences, I find a lot of clients will start kind of gravitating towards those parties, maybe BDSM parties or swingers parties
Mhm.
or kind of orgies or different kind of pleasure centric group stuff. And they'll kind of think about, well, what rules and boundaries do we want to set, right? And then we'll make an agreement like this is something that we're both okay with. We're going to go to this party and we're going to engage in X, Y, and Z, and we're both going to be okay with that. And so what they kind of start gravitating towards is this agreement that is acceptable and both parties are entering for the relationship.
Yeah. Okay. Do you find that it is mostly sex related why they want this openness, or is there some type of the emotional connection that they need to have from different people in different ways?
Yeah, look, I think that is it's really tricky to answer because I'm finding a lot of people do want to engage in kind of those, not necessarily poly, but maybe just kind of even casual relationships with others. And it's just not purely sexual. They want to have that connection. They'd like to kind of, sometimes they kind of look at that hierarchical style where we're primary partners, but I want to find another partner who I can go out and have fun with and who validates me or makes me feel good. And we lean into each other. But my nesting partner, my partner that I've got shared finances with or children with,
Mhm.
is so there's different styles, different setups. I mean, sometimes the poly community prefers a non-hierarchical style because that kind of
Okay.
gives preferential treatment to people as well. So it's quite complex once we start getting into the nuances of different relationship structures.
Yeah, so interesting. So do you find that, kind of like the ethically non-monogamous, maybe a little bit more geared towards sex, whereas the polyamorous community is more relationally based and then also sex with multiple people?
Look, do you know? I wonder actually maybe if this is different in different countries, like just the language used. So
Hmm.
I guess because polyamory means like the love of many, right? So,
Yeah.
but I still find people who engage in ethical non-monogamy, right, which is another term.
Hmm.
They use that term rather than poly.
Okay.
Right, so the terms can be used, interchangeable. I
Okay.
guess what I see is people who are in relationships and having emotional and sexual encounters, or people who are just having potentially that emotional encounter and not
Hmm.
sexual, or just the sexual and not the emotional.
Okay. Got it. Got it. Yeah, I guess where I've kind of what I see or what I think, I guess, which doesn't make it right, is more like the ethically non-monogamous is just kind of exploring, but maybe not necessarily like in full-blown relationships, and people who are in poly are in multiple relationships or maybe a triad or a, whatever number of people in their community. So I guess I'm a little bit off on that.
Well, I don't know if there's a right or a wrong way, because I guess because I see exactly the same thing, but I also see poly people who, are a poly mono couple, for example.
Mm,
Or
okay.
people who might be poly, but also have a different kind of way of doing poly, where
Yeah.
actually I've got a couple who one of them just engages with somebody purely online, for example.
Mm, okay.
Yeah, I guess the language used is tricky
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
how
It's so
people want to
interesting.
identify. I mean, some people, what I think is worth pointing out is some people identify as poly, like that's who they are,
Mm,
right?
mhm.
Not just the relationship structure. So.
Yeah. Yeah, they understand that they are not satisfied being with one person, that they're not fully fulfilled that way.
Yeah, that they are well, that they're just somebody who likes to love many people at once.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's beautiful. Do you see in your counseling people who come in a monogamous relationship that are ready to start exploring being open, and how do they negotiate that?
Yeah, all the time. It's actually getting a lot more common. Again, it's like, what are they wanting to achieve? Like some people want to achieve threesomes, for example. That's kind of been
Mhm.
popular at the moment.
Yeah.
So people might go to a play party to achieve that. They might hire a sex worker. They might engage with a friend because it's
Mhm.
trusted and they actually feel more comfortable. So sometimes
Mhm.
they're looking at kind of, I guess, setting it more of like a threesome type
Yeah.
type thing. People are also wanting to kind of maybe start dating and
Mhm.
right, and a lot of people are doing like field I guess profiles together. So a
Okay.
mono couple will set up a couples and then they'll kind of like start dating other couples or looking for single men or women
Mhm.
or even, I guess gender is kind of irrelevant. They're just looking for another person to kind of play
Yeah.
with. So that's another
Yeah.
way of kind of like dabbling into that.
Yeah. It's interesting because when I first got divorced many years ago and went on the apps, it was very hetero sexual, like very, I didn't see any polys. I wasn't getting asked for a threesome by a couple, things like that. And the last time I was on the apps, it was a couple years ago because I'm single, but I just don't care to be on the apps anymore. There was a lot more couples looking for a third partner, ethically non monogamous people that would put it right in their bio, things like that. So even in my dating life, not even professional life, I've been able to see this transition of more openness, and people more willing to explore different lifestyles, different people, different demographics, things like that, that I don't think I saw even 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's a really good point. And I think, yeah, what you're highlighting is people are a lot more transparent now, which I think is good. Is yeah, a profile might say I'm an E&M and I'm
Hmm.
just looking for somebody to something casual. And I
Yeah.
think that's quite I don't want to say popular, but that's something that's more on the rise.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I think it's interesting too because there's all these pages about like, are we dating the same guy and different things like that. And, to have people post on there like, oh, so and so said, they're ENM. And I'm like, but why are we shaming that? Like the whole point is that they're telling you. So if that's not for you, swipe by their profile, move on. We don't need to screenshot it and talk about them in a group or anything like that because people's relationship styles, their preferences, their sexuality that's very personal. And for someone to just go ahead and put it in their bio so everybody knows up front and you can choose whether or not you want to interact with that person because of that. I think that's really brave and wonderful rather than having this conversation, getting to know somebody, and then you're on your second or third date and they're like, oh, by the way, like my girlfriend and I live together, but like I also wanted to see you because we're ethically non monogamous. Now you're put on the spot. You're in the middle of a date. You've already started a connection with this person. And now you have to decide whether or not you're okay with that. I think it's beautiful that people are willing to be open about that right from square one.
Exactly. Exactly. The more transparent we are, I think at the end of the day, and we don't have to disclose everything on a first date, just to, also keep in mind. But I think exactly it gives people the option. Is this something that
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in? So if you're looking for your forever person and
Mm-hmm.
you find somebody who's E&M and is just looking for something casual, there's not really a mutual alignment there. There's a compatibility issue. And knowing that before you enter something, I think is pretty valid.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I talked to a guy for about 6 weeks or so and really had a great connection, really good guy. And it was our first date. And he was like, so I wanted to talk to you about my relationship style and da 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 da. And he lives with his partner. And I have jealousy issues. I will fully admit that. I am not going to be good in E&M. So that is a side of me that I don't know, maybe I need to do some work there, but it's just not for me. And so, being told this and I'm at lunch and I'm like totally caught off guard, it made me get emotional and all of these things where normally I wouldn't because good for you. It's just not for me. But I felt misled and I felt like I've spent 6 weeks getting to know you and you didn't think that this was important information for me to know. And so I just love that more people are talking about it in an open way without judgment and just kind of throwing it on the table right from the beginning. And I appreciate what you're saying. We don't have to tell each other everything on the first date, but I think there are certain things that people need to know up front so they can decide whether or not you're the type of person and relationship that they can get involved with.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, sometimes I guess a confusing part, for people who are in open relationships, I'll just say open as a very large umbrella.
Yep.
Um, the goalposts change sometimes. So people
Mm.
who might think that they're in a particular style, for example, maybe they only play at parties,
Mm-hmm.
they might find down the line that, well, we're going to open this up or we're going to change this. Maybe we are going to date other people. And so an open relationship isn't linear.
Yeah.
So sometimes I guess that's the other tricky thing about, I guess, if you were out on a date with somebody is, that could change. Everything's,
Yeah.
could change. Life is
Yeah.
never easy, is it?
No,
It's
no.
never
Well,
easy.
and I know that, in couples who are maybe not necessarily polyamorous, but who want to explore sexually, I have friends in the lifestyle that twice a year they'll go to Vegas. They have a week that they do those things, and the rest of the year they live a very monogamous relationship. And that's just how they enjoy that part of their relationship. They don't want it on a daily basis, but they do want it a few times a year where they're just open and able to explore and all of this, but they don't want that like boyfriend girlfriend type of long-term connection.
Yeah. We don't have, I guess, a Vegas here in Australia.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, yeah, we don't have one of those.
No, no Sin City where you just go and there are no rules.
No. No, 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 no. Been to Vegas a few times myself though, and yeah,
It's a wild experience.
it
It's a
is.
wild experience. Yeah. Yeah. And, and I just think that that's what's so great about relationships is that there isn't one size fits all. And even if you do want to participate in openness, there are different levels to that. There's different negotiation between you and your partner about what is allowed within your relationship versus your best friends who are also open and in the lifestyle.
Exactly, exactly. And for anybody kind of starting off on this, the other thing to kind of note is that you don't know until you know, right? So you can kind of keep thinking about, well, this is what I think is going to be okay, and this is what I'm going to want, right? People get caught up in a lot of these conversations. We're not going to do this. We're going to do this, and then you get into the moment and you go, screw that. This is easy. This is awesome. This feels good. That
Yeah.
you're doing that. That's cool too. So, I mean, I would just kind of keep that in mind, or you might have the opposite effect where you think you're okay with something and you really aren't okay with something. And to really, I guess, at the end of the day, it's to have really solid communication skills and
Mhm.
for you and your partner to be really on the same page there, because that's going to be important for you both to make sure that you're not making assumptions and that you can kind of move those goalposts or bring them back in if needed in the moments.
Yeah. That was kind of an experience for me is that, oh, this isn't for me. I had been hanging out with a couple and they had told me that they were open and whatever. And so we were just like hanging out. Hadn't done anything yet, nothing like that. We were just hanging out and we had gone to a pool together and they were talking about this other woman at the pool and how beautiful she was and wouldn't she be a fun partner and whatever. And in my mind, I was like, wait, I'm here with you. Aren't you supposed to be like giving me this attention and whatever? Like, and you're talking about somebody else. And that's when I was like, oh, this is not for me because I'm like getting jealous and we haven't even done anything yet. I'm not even in a relationship with these people. And I'm already getting jealous of the fact that they're talking about someone else in front of me. I'm like, this is not going to work for me.
But maybe they were getting a big group together by the sounds of it.
It could be. It could be. And good for them. I love that for them. It just was like, that was my moment of realization. And I was like, I'm getting jealous and nothing is even going on here. Like,
Well, I mean, jealousy it's a human emotion, and I think, a lot of people who start going down the poly path or the open path think that there's not going to be jealousy or they're not allowed to be jealous. And I
mhm,
just tell people you are 100% allowed to be jealous. You are allowed to,
yeah.
right? I mean, what we do with that jealousy is another conversation, but
Mm,
we're all human.
yeah.
It is, and I hate the word, but it's normal.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think absolutely and but it was eye-opening for me for sure. So on that note, when people come into you and they're ethically non-monogamous, open, whatever, and what somebody does get jealous or somebody crosses a barrier that we didn't know was a boundary, now we know is a boundary, we're not okay with that. How do you kind of help them work through that and find the tools to be able to stay connected and not just like blow up?
Yeah, that's a really valid question. I guess I would probably be doing the same strategies if it was any other couple, mono couple, for example, right? Like, so if,
Mhm,
if something happened and there was like a rupture,
mhm,
what we're doing is we're looking at, well, what happened, repairing that. And then if we were looking at, realizing that we have a boundary and then kind of implementing the boundary, it's
mhm,
understanding, well, where did that come from? And what now needs to be in place to make things feel safe again? Do we need to kind of turn back towards each other? Do we need to kind of connect a little bit more before we kind of expand again? I mean, there's really, that's a hard question to answer because depends on the couple and it depends on the incident as well.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, the couple that I had talked about previously, I mean, at that point, and I don't know what their boundaries are now, but at that point, their boundary was play as much as you can, but the male partner would not penetrate other females. He would only penetrate her. And that was their boundary at that point in time. And I think that that was obviously a very clear set boundary. And again, I don't know now, has that boundary changed as they've been in things longer and their relationship has evolved longer, but just very interesting that there are within each couple that participates in an open lifestyle, they, regardless of what type of lifestyle that is, they have different boundaries and negotiations. And I love that about that community because I think that's one thing that monogamous couples kind of struggle with. Well, all couples struggle with communication potentially, but I think within the open community, you have so much more communication and better at talking about boundaries and better at talking about what you like and dislike and things like that, that I think sometimes monogamous couples could really learn from that.
Absolutely. And, you can tell when a couple's going to do it really well is when they're pretty solid at communication. And they're very honest with each other because they have a level of, I guess, authenticity to themselves and introspection, so they can kind of understand what's going on for them. So then they're able to
Yeah.
talk about it to the other person. I mean, the example you gave was pretty good about penetration, and I'd kind of take that a few steps backwards if I was working with that couple and encourage talking about it before the penetration happened, where you bring it up and saying, "Hey, I know this is something that we've decided, but I'm curious what that would feel like, or how would you feel if we looked at, maybe working towards that, or this is what it would mean for me."
Hmm.
And so you're kind of being curious and you're talking about it without just maybe doing it.
Yeah.
Um,
No, that makes a lot of sense. What about couples who come in where one is very adamant that they want to start exploring and the other partner isn't quite there yet?
yeah, I've got a lot of those clients. That's it. Look, it's not easy because the person who doesn't want to, sometimes they really just don't want to. right? Sometimes that's just a hard no. And sometimes you'll find they'll just go along for the ride because the other person wants to. And so that doesn't necessarily always end up well because again, it goes back to the same thing we were saying. It's having the sex you don't want to be having to begin with.
Right.
So understanding, I guess, yourself is important. I mean, some people are still curious and just fearful, right?
Hmm.
So if we're afraid, we're trying to understand, well, why? Like attachment theory has a lot to kind of do with that, right?
Yeah.
Are we afraid that that other person's going to leave or we're going to be rejected because this is now happening? And so we're really kind of working through that sort of stuff. What's holding us back from doing that? If it's something that we actually kind of want to try, not necessarily say this is going to be our life choice forever.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can see how that would be. One of my most significant relationships ended with an affair. And it took me a long time in next relationships to be able to trust in things. And I had to work on my side of it because it wasn't anybody who I was newly talking to's problem. It was my problem. And I needed to work through what that looked like for me and how do I learn to trust again and to not put what happened with me in a previous relationship on a new person who had nothing to do with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, doing the work is just tough. It's tough
It
for us
is.
all to do. And I think, that's a really, yeah, example of it's just going through something that's painful and learning something and then having to do the work within ourselves to kind of change for the next relationship or just change for the better.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think whether you're doing it individually or as a couple, putting the work in is super important. I'm a huge proponent of therapy.
Yeah, yeah. Like it's not easy. Doing the work is hard. And I've got a lot of people, friends or, just even people who I work with, it seems like sometimes you just never stop doing the work. Like
Yeah.
there's always something to be working on. And I think that's just kind of poignant of life is we don't
Hmm.
stop learning and we don't stop evolving. And sometimes we go through patches that are a little bit easier than others.
Yep. Yep. I know. And it's interesting because, when I'm single, I can work on myself all I want, but the triggers aren't going to be there like they are when I'm dating. So then when I'm dating, all of a sudden I'm like, crap, I thought I had worked on that. I thought I was okay in there. And now all of a sudden I'm jealous or I'm questioning where they are and who they're with or whatever. And it's like, man, come on. I thought I worked on this.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. People really know how to push our trigger buttons.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But I have noticed the longer I do the work, and thankfully I've had amazing therapists in my life that I've been able to work with, I have gotten to the point where I start to notice the red flags sooner. The things that I'm not going to tolerate long term, I start to pick up on sooner. And for me, that's huge.
100%. And that's fantastic when, yeah, when you can kind of see things that you maybe didn't in the past and
Hmm.
you save a lot of time.
Yeah.
And I guess it also actually keeps telling you, it keeps positively reinforcing yourself like, yeah, I am right. Like I've got this.
Hmm. I can trust myself.
Yeah, I
That
can
was a
trust
hard
myself.
for me for a while because I had picked a couple not great partners in a row. And so I had gotten to this point where I wasn't really trusting myself and doing the work and putting the work in. Now I can say, I can trust myself. I can trust my judgment. And I know if things are
Yeah.
right or wrong for me.
And how badass does that feel when like,
Right?
yeah, I've been there, done that
Yep.
too. Yep, yeah, picked plenty of
Yep.
wrong people.
Yeah. We all do. Yep.
We do, we do.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's just so interesting to then get to that point where when you walk away from a relationship, there's so much less anxiety and whether or not I made the right decision and stuff. Every day, I feel more confident that I made that right decision and that I did because I have this like freeing feeling of, well, I don't have to deal with that anymore. I made this right decision. And that just reinforces my ability to trust myself going forward.
100%. Yeah. It's like looking at somebody or even your past relationship through a whole new lens. You're like, oh my God, like I can't believe that was me, or I can't believe like I was accepting that behavior, or how did I not
Yeah.
see that sooner? And so your eyesight is like crystal clear the next time around.
And I'm sure that that's true within relationships too, that when you're doing your couples counseling, that they might get to this point where it's like, all of a sudden, things are clicking and our communication is getting there, and we can see things through this whole new lens now, and our relationship just goes to that next level because we've put the time and energy in, and now we have better communication styles and tools that we can use to be a better couple.
Exactly. It's so magical when I see those light bulb moments in session and, really see couples, evolve, and I call it, like, going to relationship 2.0. It's absolutely beautiful to witness.
Yeah.
And they put in a
I
lot of
love
work
it.
to do it too.
For sure. This is not an over the night light switch kind of situation.
No, no, no. I wish it was for a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah, yes, absolutely. So, as we wrap up here today, this has been a fantastic conversation. I love this. You're so knowledgeable. Is there any parting wisdom that you want to leave with our viewers and listeners today?
Gosh, you put me on the spot. I think staying open, like being open to yourself and others, right? Like open, not necessarily to be in an open relationship or that you have to have sex or want to have sex, but understanding maybe where your black spots are, right? Like knowing where things that you don't want to confront and they're hiding there for a reason, and kind of maybe being a little bit more curious about that.
Yeah,
And starting to kind of unravel a little bit and turn more inwards so that we can, I guess, lean in and feel more connected, want to do more
yeah.
connecting.
I
It's a
love
beautiful
that.
process.
I love that. Lauren, thank you so much for being here. We will put links to how to get in touch with Lauren and how you can connect with her in the show notes. So look there and connect with Lauren. Thank you so much for being here. What a fantastic conversation.
Thanks for having me, Stephanie. This has been awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. Everybody go have a great day, have some fun, and get between the sheets. See you next time. Thank you for joining us and exploring sexual health topics here on Between the Sheets. New episodes are available every Wednesday. Please subscribe and rate our podcast so we can reach more listeners. And don't forget to tell your friends, partners, and anyone who will listen about Between the Sheets. Send any comments, questions, or stories to podcastbetweenthesheets@gmail.com. It's all one word, podcastbetweenthesheets@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and go have some fun between the sheets.